"You know, I wasn't really your first choice, right?" She said it with that smirk that used to make my stomach twist. I just nodded, said, "Hey," like I was calm, collected, and then I left. 4 years later, I'm married, I have a baby, and there she is, texting me out of the blue, telling me she made the biggest mistake of her life. Funny how life has a way of serving karma cold. I remember those early mornings in our garage like they were yesterday. The air always smelled faintly of wood stain mixed with Rachel's lavender shampoo, weekend mornings spent elbow-deep in vintage furniture from estate sales. She'd be crouched over a chair, meticulously researching paint colors while I stripped decades of old paint off a 1940s dining table. Those little weekends were our sacred ritual. I was working nights and days at a Sacramento warehouse while studying for my logistics certification, and she was bouncing between tech startups in San Francisco, always chasing the next shiny opportunity. From the outside, our duplex looked unremarkable. But inside, it was a museum of shared effort. Each piece of furniture carried the fingerprints of our teamwork, the scars of sandpapered splinters, and the warmth of hours spent talking, joking, and dreaming together. The living room wasn't fancy, it wasn't something you'd find in a showroom, but it had soul. It was ours. When Rachel started getting invited to networking events, conferences, and these fancy Bay Area meetups, I was genuinely proud. I drove her there when her car died mid-trip, sat in coffee shops editing her presentations while she worked, and even picked up extra shifts at the warehouse to fund her professional development classes. "You're going to make it big," I'd tell her when she came home frustrated over a missed opportunity. And I meant it. She had this fire, this vision. I wanted to fan the flames, not put them out. I thought we were building something together, my steady income, my practical help giving her the freedom to chase her dreams, and in time, I believed we'd both win. But, looking back, maybe I should have noticed the small shifts. The way she started commenting on her colleagues' boyfriends, the software engineers, the startup founders with glass offices overlooking the bay and cars that made my jaw drop. I was focused on my own goals, my certification, a path toward management. I brushed off her occasional mentions as harmless observations, not realizing they were comparisons. We talked about the future. Marriage, a house with a bigger garage where I could build a proper workshop, a home office for her. The duplex was meant to be temporary, but it had become home, a real, living, breathing space. I loved coming back from long shifts to find her at our restored oak desk, surrounded by color swatches and marketing layouts, completely absorbed in her latest project. I thought we were building a life, one Saturday morning and sleepless night at a time. The shift started small, almost imperceptible. Little cracks in our conversations. Rolling her eyes at my blue-collar solutions. Commenting on my focus on supply chain management instead of pivoting to tech like everyone else. "Jake, you think like someone who fixes things, not someone who creates them," she'd say, and at first, I chalked it up to stress from her competitive industry. Then the stories crept in, colleagues dating startup founders, Google engineers, guys buying weekend trips to Napa for girlfriends they'd only known a few months. I nodded politely and suggested a camping trip to Yosemite. She looked at me like I'd just suggested a road trip to Mars. Everything shifted when Harper came into the picture. Rachel met her at some exclusive Palo Alto tech mixer. Harper, a successful interior designer flipping luxury properties in Marin County, drove a white Tesla and had an Instagram feed that looked like a magazine spread. She was the kind of person who made you feel small just by existing. Rachel's eyes lit up after meeting her. "Harper really gets design," she gushed, gesturing at our carefully restored living room as if it were amateur hour. "She thinks I have real potential if I expand my vision beyond, antique shop finds." Within weeks, Rachel was spending entire weekends at Harper's studio, talking about collaborations and site visits. She came home Sunday evening smelling of expensive perfume, eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen since those first furniture weekends, except now the excitement had nothing to do with me. "Harper really understands my creative vision," became her favorite mantra, usually while scrolling through Harper's feed, showing minimalist beach houses and industrial lofts I'd never get to see. Then came the small, sharp betrayals. The promise ring I gave her for our 5th anniversary disappeared one October. She told me it got in the way while handling fabric samples and paint swatches. Her wardrobe changed too, flowing, expensive pieces, muted neutrals, textures that screamed money. "It's about presenting yourself professionally," she explained. "Harper says image matters more in design than in tech marketing." I tried to rationalize it. Maybe this was her finding herself, growing, exploring new horizons. I had always supported her ambitions. But watching her scroll through Harper's feed, eyes dreamy, hearing her praise Harper's taste, I felt like a placeholder, a reliable safety net while she explored a more glamorous life. And then that Friday evening hit. I walked in after a double shift, expecting to find her on our velvet couch, laptop open, planning her weekend. Instead, our bedroom looked like a luxury boutique exploded. Designer clothes I'd never seen carefully folded into 2 sleek leather suitcases. The kind of bags that could cost more than my truck. I asked, trying to steady my voice, "Going somewhere?" Without looking up, she said, "Actually, I'm moving in with Harper." The words hit like ice water. My brain stalled. "Moving in, with Harper?" I repeated, like saying it out loud might make it unreal. "We've been together for months now," she said, still focused on folding silk blouses with the precision of a museum curator. "It just makes sense. Harper's offering me a full partnership in her design business. Plus, her place has this incredible view and real space for my projects." My chest tightened. Months? Those weekends, late-night calls, gradual distance, it all clicked into a terrifying pattern. Then she looked at me, pity in her eyes. You know you weren't my first choice, right? It was casual, almost conversational. Like she was telling me the weather. Like she was explaining why the sky is blue. I swallowed hard. What has this always been, Rachel? She perched on the bed, surrounded by her expensive new wardrobe, speaking with a tone that flirted with fondness but landed cold. You've been my safety net, Jake. The reliable option while I figured out what I actually wanted. Safety net, the word echoed in my head. Reducing 6 years of shared dreams, weekend mornings, quiet evenings, to some functional tool, a cushion. What about our plans? I asked. The house, the workshop, our life? She laughed softly. Jake, those weren't plans. They were comfortable fantasies. Harper can offer me things you never could, security, opportunities, a lifestyle matching my potential. You're fine for practice, but not for the real thing. Harper understands my ambitions in a way you never could. Fine for practice. 6 years. And I was just practice. I took a slow breath, voice steadier than I felt. So, that's it? She nodded, serene, like she'd been delivering a weather forecast. And in that moment, I realized the person I'd loved for 6 years, the one I'd supported, invested in, believed in, had become a complete stranger. Years passed. I moved on. Built a life with someone who truly saw me, someone who loved me for me. Got married, welcomed a baby into our little world. Life was busy, chaotic, messy, and perfect in ways I hadn't imagined back then. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. A text. From Rachel. My chest tightened before I even looked at it, old instincts, I guess. My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately, erase the past completely. But curiosity, that dangerous curiosity, won. It read, I made the biggest mistake of my life. Just those words. Simple, brutal. No apology, no explanation yet. Just a confession, like she was tossing a grenade through my carefully built life. My heart did that stupid flip you only get in movies or bad books. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the text, the fluorescent lights of the kitchen flickering slightly above me. I could still smell the faint hint of wood polish from our old garage sessions, almost like a ghost memory. My mind raced. Did she ever even think about what she lost? Or was this just a lonely night, a craving for attention, a nostalgic pang? I thought about the mornings we spent elbow deep in paint and varnish, the weekends we lost to estate sales and furniture restoration. I remembered how proud I felt driving her to networking events, the way I stayed up late editing her presentations, picking up extra shifts just so she could chase those dreams. Did any of that matter to her now? A part of me wanted to fire back something sharp, clever, something that would sting. But another part, the part that had grown, that had healed, whispered, don't play her game. So I just stared. And waited. Then another message arrived. I thought I wanted him, but I was wrong. You were always the one who mattered. I was selfish. Selfish. Funny word, isn't it? 6 years of emotional labor, of support, of love, all distilled into a text, wrapped in vague regret. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Do I respond? Do I say anything? Or do I just watch the past crawl back into my life like some unwelcome ghost? I thought about my baby, my spouse, the life I'd built from the ashes of heartbreak. And suddenly, the anger, the hurt, the betrayal, they felt distant, almost trivial. I'd moved forward. I had built something real. I put my phone down. Didn't reply. Let the text sit there, glowing like a faint ember. Sometimes closure doesn't come from words. Sometimes it comes from simply knowing you've outgrown the people who once hurt you. And in that quiet moment, I realized. I had won. Not over her. But over the past. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. The texts didn't stop. Not immediately. A few days later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was longer, almost a confession, but still dripping with hesitation. I've been thinking about us. About everything we built together. I was blind. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I hope you're happy. I felt the familiar tug, the mixture of curiosity, nostalgia, and that old ache that never fully goes away. Part of me wanted to type back, to say something, anything. But I didn't. Because I knew better. I had spent years rebuilding myself, reclaiming my life from someone who had treated me like a backup plan. I pictured our garage again. The smell of wood stain, the dust motes floating in sunlight, our hands working side by side over a chipped but beautiful oak table. I remembered her laugh when a stubborn piece of veneer wouldn't cooperate, the way she'd get frustrated and then immediately apologize with a smile. That girl felt so far away, like a memory I could almost touch, but not quite. And yet, it stung. It always stings a little when someone who once meant everything suddenly realizes they've lost it. I scrolled back through my phone, looking at the old photos we'd taken, smiling faces in front of restored furniture, weekend trips, messy kitchens with flour on our hands. She had edited herself out of the story, edited herself out of me. And now here she was, trying to sneak back in, like a ghost showing up at your door after you've already moved on. I thought about my life now. My baby's laughter echoing down the hall, the smell of fresh coffee in the kitchen, the little chaos of bedtime stories and stuffed animals scattered across the floor. I had built a home filled with love, not just with walls and furniture, but with patience, kindness, and someone who chooses me every single day. I realized something then, something crystal clear. Her regret didn't matter. Her realization didn't matter. Not anymore. Because I had learned that love isn't about being the safety net for someone else's ambition. Love isn't about waiting, sacrificing, hoping they'll choose you eventually. Real love is chosen, nurtured, and reciprocated. I put the phone down. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't heavy, it was freeing. I let her words linger on the screen for a moment, unread and unresponded to. And in that quiet, I felt the weight of 6 years of betrayal lift just a little. Because sometimes the strongest answer isn't in a text message. Sometimes it's living your life so fully, so completely, that the people who hurt you fade into memories, and that's the only reply you really need. And as I watched my baby yawn and curl up in my arms, I smiled. Not for her. Not for the past. But for me. For the life I had fought to build, the love I had earned, and the future I would never let anyone else dictate. Rachel didn't even look up as she stood, resuming her packing with a kind of efficiency that made it clear she wanted this conversation over yesterday. Quick, precise movements, like a machine programmed to get the job done. Don't be dramatic, Jake, she said, almost casually, like she was reminding me of the weather. It's not like this is a surprise. We've been growing apart for months. I've outgrown what we had here. And you have to admit, what Harper and I have is more exciting, more real than anything you and I ever managed to build. I watched her fold a cashmere sweater, the kind of sweater that probably cost more than I made in a week, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't a sudden decision. It wasn't a fleeting moment of weakness. This was a carefully calculated exit strategy. Months of planning. A wardrobe upgrade. A better offer. While I was dreaming about our future, Rachel had been dreaming about a different one, and building it without me. Okay, I said finally. Just that. One word. And without another glance, I walked to my truck. I heard her calling after me as I reached the front door. Something about not being dramatic, needing an adult conversation, her voice trailing after me like a faint echo. But I didn't stop. There was nothing left to discuss. She'd made her choice months ago, and I wasn't about to beg someone to reconsider a decision she had already celebrated by purchasing designer luggage. My hands were steady as I started the engine, which was weird because inside, I felt like a sledgehammer had smashed through everything I thought I knew about my life. Without thinking, I drove east to my brother Marcus' place in Stockton. I didn't plan it, my body just knew the route while my mind scrambled to catch up with reality. When I arrived, Marcus opened the door, took one look at me, and without a word grabbed 2 beers from the fridge. That's why he's my favorite person to talk to when I don't want to talk at all. Rachel, he asked after I sat on his couch, staring at nothing for what felt like forever. I nodded. That was all I could manage. Want to tell me about it? She's been seeing someone else for months. Called me her safety net. Said I was fine for practice but not for the real thing, I murmured, voice low. Marcus made this disgusted sound that summed up perfectly how I should have been feeling. Man, that's cold, even for someone leaving. Am I okay? I asked him after a long pause, because I didn't even know myself. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left me functioning on autopilot. The weekend became therapy of a different kind. I helped Marcus rebuild his deck, letting the physical labor fill the spaces where my emotions should have been. Hammering boards, tightening screws, it was methodical, tangible, and it grounded me in a way nothing else could. By Sunday night, I'd reached a kind of clarity. Not a grand epiphany, just a quiet acceptance. Monday morning, I called in sick and drove back to the duplex while Rachel was at work, probably narrating to Harper how well she'd handled the conversation and how mature I'd been. The house felt different already, as if it belonged to someone else. I moved through it quietly, collecting only what I actually needed. The furniture we'd restored, the matching dishes, the framed art prints, all stayed. They belonged to memories I no longer owned. I packed my clothes, books, certification materials, and the toolbox my dad had given me when I moved out. Each item loaded into the truck bed felt like shedding a layer of the life that had been hijacked. The hardest part was the dining table. I paused, fingers brushing the smooth oak, remembering the evenings we spent planning a future over takeout and cheap wine. But I didn't linger. Those memories weren't mine anymore. I left my house key on the counter next to a note, good luck with everything. The words struck the balance between civility and finality. No pretense of friendship, no lingering sentimentality. Just the truth. I moved into a small, basic apartment near the warehouse. Nothing permanent, nothing decorative, just walls and space to breathe. I unpacked essentials, set up my computer on a folding table, and spent the evening blocking Rachel on every social media platform I could find. No updates about her exciting new life with Harper. No digital footprints reminding me of her absence. The act of erasing her felt relieving. Marcus called later that night, surprised at how calm I sounded. You sure you're okay? You sound too okay for someone whose girlfriend just nuked his life. I think maybe she did me a favor, I said. And I realized it was true. Being someone's safety net is exhausting, especially when you don't even know that's what you are. The year after Rachel left turned into the most productive period of my adult life. Without the constant drain of someone else's ambitions and insecurities, I poured myself into my logistics certification like never before. Evenings once lost to listening to complaints became nights of studying supply chain optimization and inventory management systems, the kind of work that made me feel alive, competent, valuable. 6 months later, I got promoted to regional logistics consultant. A substantial raise, respect from colleagues, recognition that had nothing to do with anyone else. I bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood, complete with mature oak trees and a detached garage, the perfect space for the workshop I'd always dreamed of. A place I could shape with my own hands, without negotiating every single decision with someone who had dismissed my practical skills as limitations. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building a life that was truly mine. Marcus had this idea that maybe I should start volunteering, just to meet people who weren't colleagues or caught up in the same work grind. So, on Saturday mornings, I found myself at the local animal shelter. Dog walks, basic maintenance, cleaning cages, simple, hands-on work that was immediately rewarding. No one was comparing me to someone more successful, and no one expected me to bankroll their lifestyle. The dogs didn't care if I was a regional logistics consultant or if my hair looked messy, they just wagged their tails and accepted the attention. That's where I met Lily. She was a veterinary technician who volunteered her professional skills on weekends, and she had this calm, effortless way with nervous dogs that made even the most traumatized rescues relax. Unlike Rachel or her flashy, Instagram-perfect friend, Lily was simple, practical, grounded. Dark hair and a ponytail, clothes you could actually move in, no designer labels. But her eyes were warm, brown, alive. And her laugh? Honest, uncalculated, the kind that makes you feel safe and seen in the exact moment. Our first real conversation happened while wrestling a particularly stubborn golden retriever into the tub, a dog that clearly thought mud was a lifestyle choice. Instead of complaining about the mess, Lily laughed and said, "Do you think he's trying to make a fashion statement?" And just like that, the tension melted. We started talking about hiking, which she mentioned casually while discussing weekend plans, and discovered we both loved the quiet, off-the-beaten-path kind of adventures Rachel always called boring. Our relationship grew slowly, like a sapling stretching toward sunlight. Weekends volunteering, hikes through misty forests and rugged trails, shared lunches by lakes we hiked to, everything built on genuine compatibility instead of fleeting attraction or fantasy. Lily valued my steadiness, my practicality, my ability to finish what I started. "I love that you actually finish projects," she said one night as we cooked dinner together, "and that you think through problems instead of just hoping they'll solve themselves." Those words hit harder than any validation Rachel ever gave me. 18 months later, Lily moved in. There was no grand fanfare, no contest of style. She brought her own things, blended her space with mine, and somehow our different tastes meshed without conflict. It was easy, natural, the kind of progress that doesn't feel forced. The morning I proposed, we were camping at Lake Tahoe on our second anniversary. The sunrise was spilling gold and pink across the mountains, the lake reflecting the colors perfectly. I'd been carrying the small velvet box for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment, but then I realized the perfect moment was simply us, together, somewhere beautiful. "Lily," I said, pulling the box from my jacket, "will you marry me?" Her face lit up, joy spilling from every expression in a way that couldn't be staged, calculated, or performed. And when she said yes, it felt natural. Right. Complete. We spent the rest of the morning talking about real plans, what kind of house we wanted, whether we wanted kids, how we'd combine our lives practically. It was the opposite of the fantasy planning I'd done with Rachel, grounded in reality and honesty instead of illusion and ambition. 3 years after Rachel had walked out with her designer luggage, I was in my workshop, building a crib for the baby Lily and I were expecting in 4 months, when my phone rang. That particular tone Marcus uses when he's dying to spill gossip. "You're not gonna believe what I just heard about Rachel," he said, practically before I could say hello. I paused mid-sanding, curious despite myself. The great adventure with Harper, had it gone as spectacularly as she'd promised herself? Apparently not. Not even close. Harper wasn't the successful interior designer Rachel had thought she was. She was a con artist, a sophisticated, manipulative schemer using Rachel to gain access to tech company contacts, orchestrating elaborate embezzlement schemes. Rachel, trusting and ambitious, had been roped into signing contracts and financial documents under the guise of a design partnership. Harper systematically drained startup seed funding into offshore accounts, using Rachel's marketing connections as cover. The FBI got involved after one company noticed their seed money had disappeared. Overnight, Harper vanished. Rachel was left holding the bag, about $500,000 in fraudulent contracts, all with her signature. The irony? Almost cinematic. Rachel had left me seeking financial security and creative opportunity, only to fall straight into a disaster bigger than anything she could have imagined. She lost her job when the investigation went public, spent her savings on legal fees, and faced potential jail time for unwitting involvement in wire fraud and money laundering. I set down my sander, staring at the crib frame I was assembling. My chest tightened, not with anger, not with schadenfreude, but with a deep, quiet sense of validation. Life had a way of balancing itself out, even if it took years. And for the first time, Rachel's choices no longer had any power over me. "She's been trying to contact you," Marcus said one Saturday morning, his voice tightening with that note of concern he only used when something actually worried him. "Called Mom asking for your number. Showed up at your old job looking for forwarding info. The guys at the warehouse said she seemed pretty desperate." For a second, it didn't even register. The idea of Rachel trying to track me down after 3 years felt surreal, like hearing about a character from a movie you'd half-watched once and mostly forgotten. In that time, I'd moved twice, changed jobs, gotten married, was about to become a father. She, apparently, was still stuck in the wreckage of choices she'd made back when we were together. "What did you tell her?" I asked. I wasn't afraid, just curious. Rachel's problems belonged to Rachel now, and had nothing to do with the life I'd built. "She knows you're married now," Marcus admitted. "I might have mentioned Lily and the baby when she asked if you were doing okay." That explained everything Marcus told me next. Learning that I'd moved on completely while her own life had imploded had triggered a wave of frantic attempts to reach me. Calls from random numbers. Fake social media accounts. She even tried to friend request Lily on Instagram with a profile pretending to be a veterinary supply company. "The whole thing's pretty pathetic," Marcus said, but I could hear the worry underneath. "She kept asking if you were happy, if your wife knew about your relationship history, weird stuff. Like she was fishing for leverage or looking for cracks." I set down my sandpaper and looked around the workshop I'd built with my own hands. The crib for my daughter sat unfinished on the bench. The smell of sawdust hung in the air. Rachel's desperation felt like a news report from another planet, completely disconnected from my reality. Let me know if she contacts you again, I told Marcus. And if she shows up here, I'll handle it. The attempts kept coming. Different numbers. Different fake accounts. Lily and I got good at spotting them and blocking them immediately. Her messages grew more manipulative as they multiplied, starting with casual, "Hey, how are you?" attempts and morphing into elaborate stories about how she'd been framed. I made mistakes, but you know I'm not capable of actual fraud, one message read at 2 a.m. from a Nevada number. I keep thinking about how you always believed in people's potential to change. I could really use someone like that in my corner right now. The presumption was breathtaking. That she could bridge 3 years of silence by appealing to traits she'd spent 6 years exploiting. I deleted every message without replying. Because responding would only encourage her, and I had no interest in being pulled back into her orbit now that she needed a safety net again. The final message came on a Tuesday evening. Lily and I were assembling the baby's changing table. Yet another unknown number left a voicemail, Rachel's voice, starting with apologies and then spiraling into incoherent pleas for help with legal fees. "I know you probably hate me, but I don't have anyone else to turn to. Harper destroyed everything. The lawyers say I need at least $20,000 for a proper defense. You're the only person who ever really cared about me, Jake. Please, I'm begging you to call me back." Lily looked up from the instruction manual, eyebrows raised. Should I be worried about this woman? And in that moment, I realized I'd never properly explained just how thoroughly Rachel had burned our relationship to the ground. "Not even a little bit," I said, deleting the voicemail and blocking another number. She made her choice a long time ago, and now she's living with the consequences. The baby shower had been Lily's idea, a small gathering in our backyard with close friends and family. We'd strung lights between the oak trees, set up tables with simple, thoughtful decorations that Lily excelled at. Nothing expensive or Instagram-worthy. Just warmth. Real people who cared about us. I was at the grill, talking with Marcus about turning the spare room into a proper nursery, when the doorbell rang around 3. Lily was opening gifts with her sister, laughing at tiny onesies and impossibly small shoes. I jogged around to the front of the house, expecting a late guest or a delivery driver. Instead, I opened the door to find Rachel standing on my porch. 3 years had not been kind. She looked thin, stressed thin, not healthy thin. Her blonde hair hung limp, her face sharper and older than I remembered. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a rumpled sweater and jeans that looked slept in. Her eyes had that desperate, calculating gleam of someone who'd run out of options. "Hi, Jake," she said softly, trying for vulnerable and non-threatening. "I know this is unexpected, but I really need to talk to you." For a moment, I just stared. It felt surreal, like a ghost from my past had wandered into the wrong timeline. Behind me, the sounds of our baby shower floated through the open window, Lily's laugh, the clink of glasses, friends celebrating the life we'd built. "How did you get this address?" I asked, because that suddenly seemed like the most important thing. "I hired a private investigator," she said, like that was completely reasonable. "Jake, I know you probably don't want to see me, but I'm in serious trouble and I don't have anyone else to turn to. Harper destroyed my life. I need help from someone who actually knows who I really am." The presumption was staggering. Showing up uninvited to my baby shower after 3 years, assuming she could just step back into my life. "What do you want, Rachel?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and my body blocking the doorway. Something about her energy felt unpredictable. "I need money for legal fees," she said, dropping the act. 20,000. I know it sounds like a lot, but given our history, what we meant to each other, I thought maybe you could help me get through this. I've been framed, Jake. Harper used me to commit crimes I didn't know about, and now I'm facing prison time. She stepped closer and I caught a whiff of stale cigarettes and desperation. I've learned so much about myself. I realize now what we had was real, that I made a terrible mistake choosing Harper over stability and genuine love. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost insulting. Trying to rewrite history into a grand romance she'd foolishly left instead of the calculated upgrade she'd chosen. "Rachel," I said evenly, "I'm married. We're having a baby. This conversation is inappropriate." "I know you're married," she said quickly. "But that doesn't change our history. You loved me for 6 years. You supported my dreams when no one else would. Surely that means something. Surely you can't just watch me go to prison when you have the power to help." That's when Lily appeared beside me, drawn by the voices. One hand rested protectively on her belly, the other holding the doorframe. She was radiant in the blue sundress I'd bought her for Mother's Day, dark hair in a simple braid, looking healthy, grounded, loved. The contrast between Lily's glow and Rachel's desperation was stark. "Hi," Lily said politely, like to a lost delivery driver. "I'm Lily. Are you looking for someone?" I put my arm around my wife's shoulders, feeling the solid reality of the life we'd built. "Rachel, this is my wife, Lily. Lily, this is Rachel, my ex from several years ago." Rachel's face flickered through a dozen expressions as she processed what she was seeing, someone who was chosen first, someone who represented everything she'd thrown away. "She's beautiful," Rachel said flatly. "How far along are you?" 7 months, Lily replied, instinctively stepping closer to me. "We're having a girl." "Congratulations," Rachel said, but her eyes were on me now, panicked. "Jake, could we talk privately? There are things about our relationship your wife probably doesn't know. Things she should understand." The threat was subtle but unmistakable, the suggestion she had information that could damage my marriage. I felt something cold and protective settle in my chest. Actually, I said, tightening my grip on Lily's hand, my wife knows everything important about my past, including the fact that you called me your safety net and said I was fine for practice but not for the real thing. Lily's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she squeezed my hand. Rachel's face flushed as her attempt at leverage evaporated. That's not fair, she stammered. I was young and confused. I made mistakes, but I never stopped caring about you. We could work this out, Jake. I could be part of your life again. Maybe help with the baby. I've learned so much about what really matters. Her delusion was complete now, the fantasy that she could just step back into my life. Rachel, I said firmly, Lily is my first choice. Not my safety net. Not my backup plan. Not my practice relationship. My first choice. Your problems are the consequences of your decisions. I'm not responsible for fixing your life. That's when she snapped. You can't just abandon me, she shouted, loud enough for conversation in the backyard to pause. After everything I meant to you, after 6 years together, you can't just watch me lose everything. She tried to push past me, but I stepped firmly into the doorway, holding my ground. You need to leave, I said calmly. This is my home, my family, and you're not welcome here. I'm not leaving until you agree to help me. Rachel screamed, desperation finally showing its true face. You owe me at least that much. I gently moved Lily behind me and stepped outside, closing the door firmly to shield my pregnant wife from whatever scene was about to unfold. I don't owe you anything, I said quietly. But I am calling the police to report trespassing. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 while Rachel stared at me in disbelief, realizing for the first time that her last lifeline was truly gone. By the time the officers arrived 10 minutes later, she was sitting on the curb crying, all the fight drained out of her. I gave a brief statement about unwanted contact and trespassing, watching as they drove her away from my life for what I knew would be the final time. Back in the yard, our guests pretended nothing had happened, but Lily pulled me aside as soon as I returned. Are you okay? She asked, searching my face for signs of regret. I'm perfect, I said. And for the first time in years, I meant it completely. I looked around at the people who had shown up to celebrate our baby, at Lily's glowing face, at the crib waiting in my workshop. And I knew, this was what it felt like to be someone's first choice.